Money is a tool. Financial literacy is a skill you can learn. My name is Dave Gallegos. I've spent the last 25 years in the mortgage industry with a front row seat to American financial habits. And what I have to offer is so much more than about mortgages. So join me for a journey into financial literacy, brought to you by me and Zenith Home Loans. I'm your host, Dave Gallegos. Hi, I'm Dave Gallegos. I'm the president of Zenith Home Loans. And as it says in the intro, I've spent the last now 26 years in the mortgage lending industry, and I've had a front row seat to what I call the way Americans spend their money and the American financial habits. And it's inspired me to start this podcast because actually I've learned so much, and I've learned a lot about the way I managed my money before I got in the mortgage business versus the way that I manage my finances today is completely different. A lot of that as a result of what I've witnessed and what I've seen people struggle with, and what I've seen people who are really successful, what they do. And then I began to study financial habits and financial literacy and good financial habits. And it inspired me to start this podcast because I really want to help people do this. Now, I own a mortgage company. Of course, we help people buy homes and refinance their homes. And it's such a huge part. Didn't realize before I got in this business what a huge part mortgage financing is as it relates to people's personal finances. And I am an advocate for people to become homeowners. A couple of statistics that are important to know is that the average net worth of a renter in America is 40 times less than the average net worth of a homeowner in America. Now, we can talk about all the demographic reasons and all of the geographic reasons and all of the maybe unfair reasons why that's happened. But the fact remains that becoming a homeowner responsibly can lead to great wealth in your life and create a lot more financial stability and financial prosperity. And that's really my hope, is to be able to share how to do that. So it's good timing, actually, to start this podcast. I'm recording this first episode. It's December of 2023. I'm not exactly sure what the release date's going to be, but just new statistics have just been released, and I have several of them here that I want to share as it relates to credit card debt in America. For the first time, just a few months ago, we passed $1 trillion in outstanding credit card debt in this country. It's actually up to 1.2 trillion now. And most people, including me, I have a hard time grasping exactly how much money $1 trillion is. So we're not going to spend too much time on that. It's important to know that we've never hit that level before. And even more troubling, it's 1.2 trillion. So we're like 20% over the trillion mark already. What's more troubling to me, and what really stands out, is that the median interest rate on credit card debt in this country right now, it's 24.37%. And that should shock you. It shocks me that it's that high. I don't carry credit card debt today, so it's difficult for me to keep aware of all of that. But realizing that consumers are buying things and paying 24% interest for them is a shocking reality, and something that should serve as it's a giant wake-up call for all of us to pay attention to this, because that's a bit of a crisis. And the state of the economy right now, we've had a lot of inflation, and the federal governors are trying to regulate this, and by increasing interest rates, short-term interest rates, which are having an impact on car loans, credit cards, home equity lines, all interest rates, mortgage rates are higher. But that credit card rate at 24.37% should be a shocking reality. We're going to talk throughout this podcast about how to manage debt and why non-mortgage debt is so dangerous and debilitating to people in this country. But that's one statistic that should really stand out and make people wake up. The second statistic is that the average available APRs by credit score. Now, I like how they're pointing this out in this article. It's an Investopedia article that I found online, that if you have excellent credit, between an 800 and 850 credit score, your average rates are between 20 and 27%. So not 24. That's if you have excellent credit. If you have good credit, between 670 and 739, which is theirs rating, not mine, 19.5% between 19.5 and 28.5. Fair credit, you'll have a 24% rate to 29%. And then if you have no credit or bad credit, you're probably not getting a credit card. If you got one, you're paying the highest possible rate that they can. When somebody's charging you 24% for their interest rate, for your interest rate on your credit card, what they're telling you is they'd charge you more if they could. They just haven't yet. So that's a shocking statistic. Those interest rates are incredible. Something else, they list through here the different banks, Bank of America, Barclays, Capital One, and the rates that they're offering today. They go, between 18 and 28% at Bank of America. It doesn't matter. Wells Fargo's between 15 and 25%. So very disturbing. Right now, the two things that are really standing out is that delinquencies are up to the highest level that they've been prior to the pandemic. And that's strictly a function of people are spending more than they're using. And that eventually will lead to that kind of activity where they're not able to make the payments because they keep spending. And then the big number that's so shocking and should be a wake-up call for all of us is that the number's now at $1.287 trillion. Man, that's a big number, and that should scare you, and it should scare all of us. And so I'm going to say something right now about credit card debt that I have shared this with people in the past. It's typically not received very well when I say it, but if you sit with it for a second, you're going to recognize that what I'm saying is really impactful to you and can have a dramatic impact on your life. And it's this, is that if you carry credit card debt today and you have an outstanding balance on a credit card and you lack the ability to pay it off. In other words, you don't have money anywhere to pay off that debt. And you're making the minimum monthly payment or maybe a little bit more, but you can't pay it off. In other words, you bought things and you're willing to be paying in the mid 20% range on average for interest on that outstanding debt rather than pay it off. And it simply means that you spend more than you make. Okay, so that's what you do, and that's how you live your life. And it's debilitating and it's depressing and it's stressful and it puts pressure on you. It puts pressure on your marriage. If you're married, it puts pressure on your job. It's hard to not think about it. I'll share this. I've had bad credit in my life 2 or 3 times, and I have found myself a couple of different times in my life where my personal finances were out of control. And I'll be the first to admit it's humiliating to admit it. It's humiliating. It's not humiliating to admit it now because I'm not in that situation. But when I was, it was humiliating to admit it. You don't like talking about it with anybody. So that's the first truth, is that it's recognizing that, our personal finances are personal and nobody wants to be the one talking about how they're broke or how they have too much debt, because it's embarrassing. Like I said, I have had a front row seat to people's finances. And when somebody wants to buy a house, they have to get what I call financially naked. In other words, I have to know everything. In order for me to get you a mortgage, I've got to pull your credit. I got to see what your credit scores are, and I got to see how you pay your bills. And then I need to know everything about your finances, and I get a copy of your bank statements, and I can see, how you're spending your money. I'm focusing on credit card debt today because as I kick off this podcast, my goal is to educate you on how to manage your finances better and how to help consumers live a more balanced life when it comes to their finances and to have financial peace. That's one of the things that you gain from figuring out this part of your life. It's such a critical, it's one of the top 5. I mean, when we do goal setting here for our team, there's 4 areas of our lives that are really critical. And that's number 1, it's our health, right? Because if your health's out of whack, that's not going to be any good. Then the next 3, depending on the order, it doesn't really matter. But I always say health is number 1. The next 3 that matter to everybody are our relationships, our finances, and our careers. And so our personal relationships, our personal finances, and our careers, because our career impacts so much of what's going on in those other areas as well, and our finances. So it's one of the most important areas of our life. And, when we help people buy homes, we always say that we're dealing with the 3 most important things in their lives: their homes, their family, and their money. That's not in any order that makes sense, but definitely their family, their money, and their home. So this is an area that I find that's really critical and that can really make a difference. So let's get back to the part where if you're carrying credit card debt and you lack the ability to pay it off right now, then you spend more than you make. Now, before you go and liquidate your finances and you empty out your savings account and you do things to get rid of your debt, it's important to understand what's really going on in this regard. So what you have is you've developed habits that you've got to address before you just pull the plug and fix it. Because what I've seen people do is they attempt to fix this and they do a quick fix and they haven't changed the habits that got them there in the first place. And if that's the case, they're going to be right back where they started. That's happened to me, right? So I didn't change my habits the first time I got myself out of debt. I actually just kind of moved things around and adjusted things. And then I just kept going. And what you really have to adjust is the reality of how you spend your money. So let's talk about the rest of this as it relates to credit card debt. You've got to change your spending habits. What I want is for everybody who's listening to More Than a Mortgage, I would like for everybody to commit to not carrying credit card debt that they can't pay off. Now, I use credit cards all the time, but I never carry the balance from one month to the next. And I did. It's something that I used to do. And on this podcast, on some of these episodes, these future episodes, we're going to talk about strategies and ways that you can address these debts and different strategies and approaches that you can take. This is going to be all things related to your finances. It isn't going to just be about credit cards. It's going to be about savings. It's going to be about spending. It's going to be about tracking and measuring and reporting. It's going to be about you building a balance sheet and a financial statement and understanding exactly where you stand on a regular basis. The biggest thing that I want is let's go back to that statistic that I mentioned, that the average net worth of a homeowner in America is 40 times greater than the average net worth of a renter. And renting prevents you from building any equity, and you have to pay to live somewhere. And unless you can live somewhere for free, you have to pay to live somewhere. You have to pay a landlord who can raise your rent and probably is going to continue to raise your rent every single year. Or you can suck it up and make the sacrifices and the savings and everything else that you have to make to be able to buy a piece of property, a piece of real estate that you can live in. I'm going to talk about the different books that I've read in my career. I'm going to talk about in my life about personal finances and the books that I want to share with the listener so that you can begin to educate yourself. It's going to be everything that is related to your finances. And here's what I want to leave you with on this first episode. If you find yourself in a position where you're not happy and you're not at peace when it comes to your finances, if you secretly sit around the table with your friends and you're talking and you're wondering how they're doing, and you're wondering how if everybody else is in the same situation that you're in, I will tell you that for the most part, your friends don't make as much money as you think they do. That's one of the first things I learned in the mortgage business is that I always thought everybody made a lot more money than they made. And then once I started doing mortgages, I realized, most people are pretty normal. I mean, yeah, some people make a lot more, but far more people than you can imagine finance lifestyles they cannot afford. Let me say that again. Far more people than you imagine are financing a lifestyle they can't afford. They're paying 24% interest rate on their credit cards. Car loans are in the teens now. Car loans. Paying in the teens for a car loan is crazy, or at least in the high single digits, 8, 9, 10%. It's crazy what people are doing in an effort to keep up with. I know that term, keeping up with the Joneses, is a term that I used to hear a lot when I was a kid. I don't hear it as much anymore, but it's a term that just means that, I got to do like all of my friends are doing. So just know this. Most of your friends aren't making as much money as you're making. Most of them, a lot of people finance lifestyles they can't really afford. They're broke at a very high level. And I've been there. So this is, I've been there. I'll share my experiences. I'll share what I've gone through in an effort to open it up and hopefully get you to a point where you feel like you can raise your hand and talk to somebody to help you. And I'm also going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about how you are your best friend. You're your own best friend when it comes to your personal finances, okay? Nobody cares about your money as much as you, no matter what they're telling you. So you've got to be extremely careful about who you talk to about money and investing and saving and credit, because there's a lot of people out there that are trying to make a buck off of you. And you can do this yourself. You can take care of your credit by yourself. You can take care of your investing by yourself, but you need to be educated. If you're going to work with a financial advisor, you need to be educated. You can't abdicate what's happening with your finances to somebody without understanding what's going on. When it comes to managing your credit, you can fix your credit as fast as anybody else can. And nobody's going to care about your credit as much as you either. So nobody cares about your finances as much as you. Nobody cares about your credit as much as you. And they shouldn't, because it's not theirs, it's yours. So you need to take ownership, and I want to empower you with that idea. You can have excellent credit. You can have excellent finances. You can have financial peace. And that's what we're going to talk about on this. Thank you for listening to my first episode. I look forward to the second one with everyone, and have an awesome day.
Thank you for listening to More Than Mortgage with Dave Gallegos, brought to you by Zenith Home Loans. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe anywhere you find podcasts and share this episode with a colleague who would also find value.